Oh wait, try it now. Wait. Oh shoot. Testing.
getting on time. Consistency, and genuine connection. In a world where trust in traditional media is shifting, Brett's Talk, the new face of credibility, building trust in the age of personality-driven news, dives into how young people and storytellers can build trustworthy personal brands without losing the sight of ethics or integrity. He's here to help us understand how credibility works on platforms like TikTok, what it takes to break through the noise, and why how you say something can matter just as much as what you say. So if you've ever wondered how to build trust, challenge misinformation, or still be true to your voice, this one's for you. Please give a warm welcome to Brett Kenyon, aka Papa Mississippi.
All right, well, you want to come down here, we'll give you free room and board, and you could just stay at our house. Now, what he didn't tell me was staying at his house meant literally living in the closet in their garage, but that part didn't matter to me because once I got down here, I just fell in love with Mississippi. I branched out, started in the Belhaven neighborhood. I arrived at night, so when I walked out the next morning in the summer heat, I thought I was walking into a brick wall. I had never experienced heat and humidity combined quite like that before. But I fell in love with first the Belhaven neighborhood, then expanded that to the rest of Jackson, then started exploring all of Mississippi. And after a while, just realized this is home. This is where I want to be. I want to stay here. There are things that some of the very first things I fell in love with, besides the food and the people, were the fact that the rest of the nation just didn't really talk much about Mississippi. I didn't know much at all about it. When I got here, I started learning things like, wow, you have literally every different type of weather out there. It's the tornadoes or the hurricanes, earthquakes. I had no idea that happened here, but some of the history behind some of those earthquakes and those storms is just fascinating. And so from the very beginning, I was hooked. I started out my career here in Mississippi as a, go back. There we go. As a youth pastor, actually. It was one of my very first jobs, and I just kind of fell into it. It was one of my, I think, probably the happiest that I've ever been in any job. It was just, I loved going into work, doing the trips, doing the time with the youth group there. But when it came to be about the time that I was looking at getting married, I realized that that was not going to support a wife and kids, and I needed to find something else to do. So WJTV up in Jackson, Mississippi was kind enough to offer me a foot in the door. I started as a sales assistant and kind of started learning the industry from the inside out there. As different opportunities opened up inside the station, I would walk into the commercials that were talking about how accurate the weather was that week, or coming up today at 5, here's the story, the topical promotion. That's the world that I worked in. My job was to make sure no one really knew that I existed. It was to make sure that the people that I was working for in the newsroom were front and center of everything, that we built their credibility, that we made sure that people trusted them and that people preferred to get their information from them. The rules then were very clear. It was, I stay behind the camera, I don't write the stories, I just market the stories. I try to convince people that this is something worth tuning in for. So getting into what I do now was quite the leap, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit about how that came about. But what I do now for my full-time job is I run a small marketing company just out of my house called Climbline Strategies. And it's a term you'll probably hear a lot more going forward is fractional marketing, fractional accounting, fractional strategy. What that basically means is instead of getting a full-time job at one place and that being your whole universe, you work as a part-time worker at multiple places. And so for me, with marketing, that's what I do. I was just up in Connecticut last week with a company that makes sailboat rigging. And let me tell you, Connecticut in January, great time to be up there. I have never been more cold in my life. I landed 2 days after a snowstorm they said that was the worst in 10 years. So I got the full Connecticut experience. I'm sure it's a beautiful state under the snow, but unfortunately didn't get to see any of that. But I go from that to a company here in Mississippi that puts pesticide in military uniforms, to a company that makes radars that go into correctional facilities that detect heart rate and breathing, and it's just a broad variety of all these different, very small niche companies, and I work part-time within each of those, and that's how I pay the bills. But the passion project that I do on the side is what we're here to talk about today, which is Papa Mississippi. And on TikTok, that has grown to about 100,000 or so followers. When you start adding in Facebook and Instagram, it's getting up closer to that 200,000 mark, which to me is it has just blown me away. At no point in my life did I ever assume that I was a voice that would be not just worth listening to, but people would want to listen to. I think all of us have that feeling usually when you hear yourself, your voice recorded, and you listen back to it, or you watch yourself on video and you just kind of look at it and go, wow, I'm just irritating. Why would anybody want to listen to this? But the way that I got into it was I started as a project for the news team, putting together some ideas for how to embrace some of the new media that was coming out. TikTok was really taking off at the time, and I was trying to convince the reporters and the web staff and the editorial board that this has to be part of the future. We don't give up the broadcast side. The TV is still king in a lot of ways. We're still publishing our articles on the web, but the social media side, vertical video, kind of that raw, genuine, unpolished product, that is flying, and it's going to start overtaking us soon. And we've got to be a part of it, or we're going to be playing catch up. So I couldn't quite get folks to get on board with that yet. When a lot of times, as those of you know who are working here in the newsroom, it's a very busy environment. You have your to-do list that is just constantly growing. And so the idea of taking a whole new thing and dropping it into your responsibilities list it's a really hard sell, especially when you're not in a professional newsroom, when you're not giving them more money to do so. You're like, hey, we're going to pay you the same, but do all this extra work as well. So what I started doing was recording some just test videos using myself and trying just some ideas of, okay, here's how we could present the 5 top stories of the day. Here's how we could do a lighter feature piece in the area, or a news quiz, or I worked with some of the meteorologists to tell some of the small history stories from around Jackson. And I used all that. After a few months of that, I put together my findings, said this is what I found works, this gets engagement going, this does not work, never do that. I put all that together into one piece, and then I turned it in and said, here's what I found, use it if you can. If this is too much, forget it, but at least we tried. So they ultimately looked through it, they loved what I'd found, but they said, we just don't have the resources to do this right now. But unbeknownst to me at the time, the sample videos that I was doing as just the test started getting actual followers, and people started really appreciating the videos that had gone out and saying, could you do some more of these? So right about the same time, my daughter, I have 4 kids, so constantly exhausted. My daughter is turning 11. A couple of years ago, she had made the comment to me about living in Mississippi that essentially was a very negative comment. It was, why do we have to live in Mississippi? Why can't we live somewhere else? And it struck me that my kids, they didn't have, we weren't instilling a pride in where they were from. They were all born here. My wife is from Jackson, multi-generation family there in Jackson. I now have more in-laws and cousins that I know what to do with here in Mississippi because of that. But we hadn't done a great job of giving them reasons to be proud of Mississippi. And I was noticing it even online, whenever any stories would come out about Mississippi, it was just people would just dogpile in the comments on the state. And it was just, they would hit you with the usual talking points of, oh, well, you rank 50th in this, you rank 50th in that. What is there to even do in Mississippi? And between those two things, I started to get borderline almost angry because I had been here for so long. I had fallen in love with this place, and it killed me that there were so many people that weren't seeing what I was seeing. And so I started looking around on social media, and I realized we do have a lot of content creators here in Mississippi that are doing some solid work, and they're pushing out each of their different angles about the state, and they were doing some fantastic things. But I noticed that there was a gap specifically around Mississippi history. And that was something that's always been fascinating to me. I love history. If I could go back and do a job, and I think a history professor probably would have been pretty high up there. But I found that there was this gap there, and talking with some of the meteorologists at the TV stations who just, I don't know if that's a prerequisite for being a meteorologist, is that you have to know all the interesting stories about the state. But they always had something cool. And I'd go through the break room and they'd drop something on me like, hey, did you know we once had an earthquake that made the Mississippi River go backwards? And that I had no idea. That's so cool. I went, looked it up and was fascinated. Then another one will come by and say, oh yeah, didn't you know there's a volcano underneath the arena in Jackson, Mississippi, and that's not the only underground volcano in Mississippi. And you start looking into one thing, and then it leads you to another, and soon you're discovering things that the people that shared those great stories with you, they didn't know themselves. And then they're starting to come to you for ideas. And so that gap is where Papa Mississippi started. And the name came from just straight marketing. It was, my kids call me Papa, and I was going to be talking about Mississippi. So I combined those two things together, and that's where the name came from. And being somebody from out of town, that it ruffled some feathers eventually, because it felt like, who's this guy from Pennsylvania? He wasn't born here. Why is he claiming Mississippi as home? But I'll show you as we get into this a little bit, just where that voice developed and where some of those folks that were pressing the hardest against me at the very beginning became eventually some of my strongest advocates and strongest associates in this field. So the thing I wanted to start off with is, because I know we have a lot of journalism folks in this room, is that there is a big difference between what I do and where the traditional journalism lies. And one of the biggest things is that as a journalist, your responsibility is creating the facts that the rest of us are using in our arguments, basically. You have people that are arguing online over this is true, no, this is true. You're the one providing that source that they point to and say, no, look, this was reported right here by this person. This is how we know that this is true. And so because of that, there's this incredibly powerful responsibility that you have as a journalist, where you have to keep that middle of the road, you try to stay as unbiased as possible, presenting just the facts, showing how you got to the facts, showing that process that you used. That is vital to making sure that people like me have your information that you've vetted and clarified, that then I can take and provide perspective on it. I could say, okay, this story was just done by a reporter out of USM, and it showed this. So let me tell you how that applies to your life. Here's how that story, here's why I'm worried about that story, or here's why I think that story is great news for my family. I'm providing a worldview, a way of looking at that story in a way that draws attention to it. But if you or the journalists that I would be following didn't create that story to begin with, I'd have nothing to share. So there is a vital need for that, for the journalism side of this. But I'm going to talk a little bit about where this next side is here in a second. When it comes to so I think the biggest takeaway there is just that last line there, is that what I do and what others like me do is not in any way replacing journalism. It's building on it. We're standing on your shoulders, essentially, just using your words and your work to help amplify that to reach a new audience. So here's, as I mentioned, here's some of the things that as a journalist, you're a lot more restricted in. You have to retain that neutrality, and that's going to vary a little bit based on which newsroom you're working in. Some going to be very strict about certain things and how information is presented. Others might give a little bit more wiggle room. It tends to vary a little bit from company to company, but once you get in there, they're going to set you down and be like, this is the way we do things. This is what you're allowed to post. These are the opinions you're allowed to share publicly, and the opinions you're not allowed to share publicly, because they have to maintain that credibility. So there's a lot of stricter rules there. But with creators, we have a little bit more flexibility there, because we are coming at this from a authentic, I'm just a person perspective. I am the guy next door sharing my perspective, sharing what I have learned, sharing the results of my research. But as a creator, I have to also be able to say, I am not the end-all, be-all source here. I have done this work to the best of my abilities. I'm often wrong. If I am wrong, I have to come out and say, hey, guess what? I got this. I messed this one up. Here's how. When it comes to things like bias, I tend to lean into that, not to show a bias, but to remind people that anything they hear from me, there is going to be a bias behind that. And that's a really important thing, I think, for many people to understand, is that bias, it gets thrown around as a word as like a bad thing. But it's not. Bias is just the way that we see the world based on how our experiences leading up to this moment put us together. How the puzzle of us was completed, and then how we see the world through that. So if you were raised in a certain part of the country and you had a particular family and you went to a particular school and you went to a particular church, you're going to see the world differently than somebody that did the polar opposite of those things that you did. Now that doesn't mean that it's wrong that you see the world in one way and they see the world in the other way. You just have to acknowledge the fact that as a human, I have a bias. And with creators, with journalists, you have to work so hard to just keep that out of the conversation altogether. But as a creator, it's something that you can embrace a little bit more. And that's one of the first steps towards authenticity that I have found, was just coming right out and saying, hey, I'm going to be talking about Mississippi a lot, but I'm not from here. This is stuff that I have learned since I got here. If I got something wrong, please let me know. And let me tell you, they will do that. When you're doing news, there's this great gap on like TV. There's this great gap between your viewers and you. They can send you an email or post something on social media, but their immediate response isn't immediately attached to your story. On social media, you get the unfiltered response of everybody. There's no guessing what people think of you. But that is, while that can be a tough world to live in and can kind of drain you with your mental health, it's also really valuable in a way, because you're getting an immediate feedback that you don't get anywhere else. So if they like what you're doing, you know that they like what you're doing. If they don't like what you're doing, you know that they don't like what you're doing. But what I like to do is just be right up front and say, hey, here's my bias. Here's how I got to this point. I could be wrong, but this is where I am right now. And people will respect that even if they disagree with you. So here are the kind of the things that I learned for the TV station that I had found worked well on social media, especially TikTok, and that I wanted to pass along to you as well, because these were some of the things that really helped my videos at first start reaching a bigger audience. One is, you would think that having a really polished video is just going to shoot you to the top of the list, but it's really not that, because the more polished that your product is, the more it looks like something that was scripted, that's not completely genuine, or worst of all, potentially an advertisement. Y'all have a really interesting place. Your generation has a really interesting place in the world, because you have grown up surrounded from the very beginning by just about every possible advertisement out there. So from the time you were kids, you were having ads interjected into your daily life. That's something that's unique to y'all. And one of the superpowers that it's giving you is that you have an ability to spot an ad almost immediately. Like, it's this innate ability that you have, the way that your brain sees the world, where you're like, that's not real, that was paid to be there. It's one reason why you are so good at spotting AI. And then you'll see a picture put on Facebook. You could see 500 people convinced it's real, and you're looking at it going, how in the world do they not know that this came from ChatGPT? That's because that's the world that y'all grew up in. So that overly polished look, it tends to turn folks off. They're looking for a little bit of that raw to make sure that it's something real. talking like a human being is another thing that's really important. We have, if it's too scripted, if it sounds like a police report, then it's just that authenticity is lost. People aren't looking to creators to hear something regurgitated from an official press release. They're looking for your take on it, for what they might have missed, to have it explained in a way that they can understand. So talking like a human being is huge. Showing your thinking process and not just the conclusions, that's a powerful one. Saying like, okay, I went to the Secretary of State website, they have this tool, and I dug down to this report, and that's where I found this. And for one, people love following along with that because then it educates them on how to investigate on their own. But it really impresses them because they're like, oh wow, look how this person knew how to work the system. But the major takeaway from that is that it shows how you got to your conclusion. So even if your conclusion, you come back later and you say, okay, I think where I landed on that wasn't quite accurate, people can say, all right, I get that, but I also see how you got to that point. And so they don't lose that trust. People also connect with people. They don't connect with brands, and they don't connect with brands that are pretending to be people. So unlike in journalism where you are representing a news brand, as a creator you're representing yourself. You are your brand. And you want people to recognize that you're a person. You're not something that was put together by a marketing group. You're real. But the last thing is that authentic, I find that some folks will take this totally the opposite direction and decide that authentic means just unprepared. You're just winging it. You're just talking off the cuff and you just kind of making it up as you go along. That side doesn't work either. You still got to show that you are someone that has valuable information to your listeners. It doesn't have to be super polished, but it still has to be real. It still has to be correct. Now, I mentioned about the biases, and I covered this a little bit already, but one of the things about being a creator is it's okay to say that you don't know something. When you get in front of a camera and you start talking and you have your stage voice or your kind of your video persona, it tends to have a very confident feel to it. And one big reason for that is because you're not usually just taking your first raw take and posting it. You're making multiple takes and you're getting the ones that look the best and where you sound the best, and you're editing those together. And so people are seeing the very best possible version of you doing your story. So a lot of times that translates into, oh, well, this person they must really know what they're talking about. Look how confident they are. And sometimes that can come across as, for lack of a better word, know-it-all. It's just, oh, well, this person, look how confident they are in their wrongness. So being able to step in and say, I don't actually know an answer to this. I will find it out, though. Or to say, I said this in another video. Somebody wrote me and they said, hey, go look up this historical record. I think you'll find that you were maybe a little bit off on that. And then to come back and say, hey, look what I learned today. Because one of the philosophies that I live by is that you learn a lot more, infinitely more, from the mistakes that you make than you do from your victories. If something goes well, you just keep doing it even if you didn't fully understand why it worked. If you fail at something, if you're wrong at something, if you get called out on something and you have to go back and revisit that, I guarantee it sticks in your head so much better for the next time. So there's this mentality in the world that you have to be right all the time or you're weak or your input is invaluable. The only time that you're going to get in trouble is if you present yourself as somebody that's always right, because eventually the day is going to come when you're going to be wrong about something and that whole Jenga tower is going to come toppling down. If you from the beginning can keep just a sense of humility and of this is what I believe to be true based on this evidence, But if you have that scientific approach of like evidence can eventually be proven wrong, I might eventually find better evidence. I might find that that evidence that I used was not actually as connected as I thought it was to this conclusion that I reached. If you can maintain that humility, it goes so far, and people will be so much more forgiving when something goes, if something goes wrong. Now, on the technical side, there are some fundamentals that you still have to follow as well. And part of this isn't just because of your viewers, it's the algorithms. TikTok especially, and I'll get into a little bit about TikTok because it's been changing quite a bit recently, but and when I got started especially, the algorithm was very unforgiving if you had bad quality video. If you were using images that were kind of grainy, if things were looked out of focus, if there was a lot of background noise, if people couldn't hear your voice over the sounds in the background, or you had a bad echo or a bad microphone, or you were in a dark room and just shadows all over your face, that type of thing, the algorithm would flag that almost immediately as poor quality content, and then it just sets it at the back of the line as recommended material. So if you record a video, it could be the most fascinating story in the world. It could be the greatest viral moment ever. But if that visual and audio quality isn't there, most of the time the system is going to be like, I don't care, I'm not risking it. See, the algorithms are built with one thing in mind, and it's not to produce truth. It's not to produce any sort of outcome other than keeping the user on the platform. It's looking always for videos that the person's going to like because they want that person to keep on scrolling. If there's a video that makes somebody say, oh, there's a link to another website here, I'm going to go check that out, those tend to not do well because it takes the person off the platform. If it's a bad video and it kind of reminds the person, oh, yeah, I guess I have been watching videos for a while, that's a good one to stop on, that's the worst possible thing for that algorithm. So it's constantly looking for something that's going to be interesting to the person that's watching and something that's going to be a high enough quality that they're going to keep watching. One of the biggest tricks that I've found that keep people watching is cutting out the breaks, the ums and the big breaths and the pauses between sentences and at the beginning and the end of videos. If you can get in there and clip those out and just make it all just go together so it's just fast, 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 that tends to keep people and their attention span a lot longer. Every time there's an every time there's a breath, every time there's a break, that's just one chance for a person to scroll away. And that's bad for the algorithm sees that as bad, and then your videos don't get watched the whole way through, which is kind of counterproductive to you making them in the first place. The framing that you learn in photography for TV and for the web, that all matters here as well. You want to find that shot composition that works, where you're not too close, you're not too far away, it's creative, it's well lit. You want to frame people well, keep the eyes at about the same level in your shot throughout. Don't be bouncing all over the place. Don't make people seasick with the handheld, bouncing around like this. Let me tell you, getting a good gimbal is really helpful if you're going to be walking around a lot. Just something to take a little bit of that bounce out, because if people start getting annoyed at the quality, it doesn't matter what you're saying, they're going to leave. This one was a really cool one because this one gets into a little bit of the psychology, and it's that people decide within the first 3 seconds whether or not your video is worth watching. If you don't grab them in 3 seconds, the chances are they're going to scroll away. Now, at some point, if you get to a point where you have a brand or a following that's fairly large and they know what to expect from you, just seeing you is going to be enough to keep them around. But especially at the very beginning, when you're starting out, you have to give them that sales pitch immediately. It doesn't even have to be a complete sentence, just something at the beginning to hook them, to pull them in. And that was something we learned from in marketing for TV, was when we did the topical promotions or the news promotions. It was, you got to let them know in the first 3 seconds why this story is important to them. It was the same thing when we did our newscast opens. It was, why are these stories important at the top of the newscast? Here's the top 3 stories in a 1 or 2 sentences describing them, because people are deciding within that first couple of minutes whether or not to stick around for the whole thing. You want to start with the payoff, which is complete opposite to the way things used to be. It used to be you had plenty of time to build up this story with your promo or your commercial or your video and save the big payoff for the end. Today it's the exact opposite. How many of y'all have noticed, like with movie trailers now, there's like a mini trailer before the actual trailer. It's about 3 or 4 seconds of like the biggest explosions or the biggest laugh or the most shocking moment, and then it says the trailer's beginning. So it's a commercial for a movie that is running because they want to grab you and show you the best part first. If you know there's going to be a good payoff, you're going to stick around for the whole thing. If you're just guessing, there's so much content out there. Most people aren't going to gamble on that. They're going to skip past until they know they find something they like. This is probably the most important thing, though. And this is whether you're in television, whether you're creating online, whether you're in marketing, any sort of communications business out there. What you are asking is, why should people care? Why does my message matter to them? How is their life going to be better because they stop to listen to me? A lot of times people will start a channel and it's more like a journal. I think we've all seen those, where you get people on there that are just like, I decided to go to the store today, and I got this, and here's what I had for breakfast. And people think just because they're talking that someone's going to listen. And sometimes that works, but it's very, very rare. Usually what you want to have is the person that gets up there and starts talking with their listener in mind. So they could say, I got up and went to the store today, but then you have to really quickly turn that into why anybody else would care. I found this on aisle 3. This is insane. If you don't get here and get this before it's gone, you're going to regret it. You're giving them right off the bat some way of taking your experience and applying it to their lives, and that's when they're going to start really listening to you. Because ultimately, we're all selfish. Nobody is really listening because somebody's talking. We're listening because we want to learn something, we want to experience something, we want to improve who we are in some way. So for me, one of the things that I did with Mississippi history was, you could go through and recite the dates, you can go through and talk about the names and the places and that type of thing. But what really brings it home is when you find the stories that connect to life today. One of my favorite ones was Meridian. There was this, when Meridian was being built, you had, and I'm blanking on their names right now, but you had 2 major developers there. They were kind of the power brokers of the city. And they were fierce, fierce business rivals. And they were fighting constantly over the future of the city and how it was going to be laid out, how the economy there was going to work. It was just whoever won this fight was basically going to hold influence over the second largest city in the state for decades and decades and decades. And so at the time, Meridian was being laid out. It was a quickly growing city because the railroads all intersected right there, which is where the name comes from with Meridian. It's just like an intersection. And these guys, one I believe was a merchant, one I think was like a landowner, they each had a different idea of how the city should be built. One of them felt that all the streets should follow latitude, longitude lines. So when you make your squares of your city blocks, they should be, one's going along latitude lines, one going along longitude lines. The other guy said, this is a railroad city, so our streets should run parallel to the railroads. What they wound up doing was they both started developing they never settled on one of those ideas, they both just started building streets. And it got so petty, I guess, at some point, that they would even have guys go out to the other guys' construction sites and move the markers to try to get the streets to go the way that they thought that they ought to go. And they'd interrupt the plans and just do anything to kind of get ahead. Well, if you look today at Meridian, if you find a map and you look straight down on it, you see some bizarre intersections there. There are just the streets. You'll have intersections where it's like, instead of just going straight across and you continue on the other street, it's you go in here and you come out here, slightly angled off that way. And anybody that lives in Meridian will be very quick to tell you, like, driving around those parts of downtown can get really frustrating sometimes. And if you look straight down if you look on Google Maps after this and you look on there at Meridian, you'll see that you have these perfect square city blocks, and then all of a sudden you have these diagonal ones that just go crashing into it from the side, and it winds up with all these weird triangle-shaped intersections in there. And when somebody's just driving that day to day, you're like, why in the world did they build the city this way? This just doesn't make any sense at all. And that's usually as far as their thinking gets. But when you come in and you're like, here's the Mississippi history, and here's how it explains why your world is the way that it is today, they go crazy. They love it because suddenly it gives them a new way of looking at the world around them and a new way of appreciating the world that they're growing up in. So finding that way of just giving it that personal twist is one of the fastest ways that you're going to find your content is growing. The other side is that story structure still wins, always. As when you're working in journalism, you're taught to build your story out in a way that follows that story structure. Beginning, middle, end. With your videos as a creator, it's got to be the same thing. You're leading them in. You've got them that first 3-second hook where you pull in their attention. Every 10 seconds, you're giving them a reason to stick around, but you're also building that narrative. You have your especially when, for me, it's a little bit easier because when I'm talking about history, there's already that timeline kind of built in. When you're talking about things like news or politics or even recipes, whatever you're talking about, finding a way to build that story structure in there keeps people because our brains are wired for it. It's one of the coolest things, and it's if I come back in the future, I may have to just talk about just this sometime. But the way that we as humans treat stories, it is one of the most valuable currencies that we have in our world. From the very beginning of human history, from paintings on walls to writing on Egyptian papyrus to hieroglyphics, wherever you start, it's one of the very first things that we did was tell stories as a way of explaining the world around us. And today, if you think about it, the most popular, the richest people, the most popular people, the people we consider our heroes, they tend to be movie stars. They tend to be you look at actors and actresses, and why are they up at the top of the tier in our society? It's because they are our greatest storytellers. They put us into situations, fictional or non-fictional, where we have a new way of seeing the world and experiencing it. And for that, we elevate them to royalty. So if you can find a way to weave those stories into what you're doing, our brains are wired to follow those stories. Now there is this is the unglamorous side of it, is that there is like a strategy to it, to the posting and when you put things out there. You have to know the algorithms, and there's each platform is a little different. Each platform is going to have a different audience. For example, Facebook tends to have a skew towards the older audience. TikTok, at least used to, skewed more towards a younger audience. The algorithms work a little bit differently according to what they reward, according to what they punish. One of the things that would always get me is, I told a story about, I think it was John Wilkes Booth. There's a legend that he actually escaped and lived out the rest of his days hiding in a town called Guntown, Mississippi, ironically. And there's people that really believe that. And sharing that story, was very awkward on Twitter because there's certain word, or on TikTok because there's certain words that the algorithm will punish you for saying. You'll notice people started saying unalived a lot as a term. That came from TikTok because if you said words like kill or murder or shot, the system would flag that as violent content and would downgrade it, so not as many people would see it. So people would learn to replace certain words that were hurting their reach. So unalived instead of murdered. Now, because I don't like to reinvent the wheel, I would record a video for TikTok and then post it to Facebook. And on Facebook, on TikTok, hearing the word unalived, it makes sense. You know, people are used to hearing that. On Facebook, they weren't as used to hearing that, and they were convinced that it was either some bizarre new slang, it was a joke that just wasn't funny, it was me being politically correct was an accusation that I got a lot. And I would always have to educate folks on that and say, no, that's not it, I promise. It's just because I don't want the robot overlords to take away my video or take my content down. I want you to be able to see it. So you have to be able to, you have to be able to learn what the algorithm is looking for in each. And real quick, I just have to say, just on a personal note, I was on a flight a week ago, and I had a cold when I got on the flight. And you know how when you get your ears pop when you're on there? My ears have not unpopped since I got off the flight last week. So if it feels like I'm shouting at you, just know that in my head it sounds like I'm underwater. So I'm relying on my time in community theater to try to reach the back of the room. So front row there, if I'm blasting you out of your seats, that's where that's coming from. So going back to the kind of the unglamorous side, knowing what the algorithm wants, that's a big part of it. But there's also human natures you have to take into consideration. What time of day are you posting? The algorithms, most of the time, they will look at the first hour that you have a video live to determine how popular it's going to be. If it's popular within that hour, then it assumes this will be popular for the next week. If nobody watches it within that hour, then the system goes, we're kicking this to the back of the line. So you want to make sure that you're posting when most people are on their phones. A lot of times you just kind of think to yourself, like, when am I usually just scrolling? First thing in the morning, usually, but then you're kind of looking for just small hits and updates. Lunchtime is usually one where folks are settling in for a little bit more long form content. Between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock tends to be a hot spot most days, because that's when folks they're home from work, they've gotten settled, they've finished eating, they're on the couch watching TV, and they have their phone open here while they're watching it. That's the time that you're going to get the most engagement, because people are just settled in, they're looking to relax with some content, and look, there's your face, you're providing it for them. There's also a lot of times at night, people have varying bedtimes, but that 10 o'clock hour, oddly enough, sometimes gets a nice spike of traffic on there too, because people are lying in bed, looking at their phone before they go to sleep, ignoring all the warnings about blue lights, which I also constantly ignore. But what it comes down to more than anything, though, is consistency. If you are posting daily, the algorithm and the systems recognize that, okay, this person's serious. They're going to keep giving content. It's not a one-time thing. If the people that I know that do the most successfully are posting 2 to 3 times a day. You don't really have to worry about overwhelming your audience, because they're not going to see everything you post. I have out of the 100 or so 1,000 folks following on TikTok, when I post a video, a lot of times 5% of that following actually sees the video initially. So you don't have to worry about flooding the market too much. If you have something quality, get it out there. Just try to make it at a time that works. Now, if it's breaking news, though, that goes out when it breaks. It doesn't matter what time of day that is. The very first story that goes out about the breaking news tends to do the best. So that's one where it's good to kind of get ahead of the group. But if it's something that you're putting a little bit of time into, it's more of a feature, then you can kind of save it for those key times to post. As far as which platform you want to be on, there's like I mentioned, there's a lot of different audiences out there. You have the YouTube audience that it's a very powerful audience there. In fact, they say that folks use YouTube now more than Google to search for things. I don't know if that's true for all generations or just specific generations, but there's a growing number of people that go to YouTube before they go anywhere else. That's usually, there's a lot more educational content there. There's a lot more tools for building that subscription-based following. The only downside to YouTube is it's enormous, and it's really hard to get your foot in the door there. With others like TikTok, before some of the changes that went through, that was one where you could have 10 followers and still go viral if you had the right content. So that one was really strong for a while there. After the ban last year and all the back and forth with things being sold, this is unofficial opinion, just as somebody that works in it every day, but I think the algorithm that made it as good of a platform as it was is gone. I don't think it is there anymore at all. I think when it looked like it was going to be completely shut down, I think ByteDance, the ones who developed that, my guess is they pulled out that proprietary information and they put kind of a placeholder in there because ever since they brought TikTok back, it was completely different in the way that it pushed content out. So the reason I mention that is you are building a house by building your brand, by becoming a creator, but if you focus on just one platform, you're building a house on rented land is the best way to put it. At any given point, the rug can be pulled out from under you because you don't own that platform. You just are using it to push your content out there. Facebook at any given moment could completely change the way that they push things out. They could update their feed again, and as they do, and just move everything around so no one can find you again. They could just flip the switch and just go away completely. And this was a warning for newsrooms as well. It was important to have a presence there on social media, but also be aware that social media does not belong to the newsroom. It could go away at any point. So don't put all your eggs in one basket there. Remembering that there's different audiences on different ones. Different audiences are going to be awake at different times on different ones. And then the goal with all of it, though, is to collect that audience. So if there's a way to collect email addresses, if there's a way to collect followers somewhere else, a Substack or something, where if every platform went away tomorrow, the folks that had come to rely on you would still know where to find you, is going to be vitally important. I'm almost done here, and then we'll take some questions. But this is a question that I always get is, how does the money side of it work? Which is very intriguing, and also a thing that is changing constantly. So when I first started on TikTok, the way that the money worked, the monetization worked was you basically got paid $1 for every 1,000 views that a video got. Once you hit 10,000 followers on there, you could sign up to their program, and then they paid you $1 per view. So when I first started in TikTok, and I had around 20,000 viewers, I was really impressed with how that worked. It was, all of a sudden, just by doing these videos, I was able to pay my electric bill and my gas bill, with something other than, just my salary from the TV station. And just having a couple bills off your table is a huge deal sometimes. But then, they'll tweak those things throughout the year. So it's not a consistent thing with the ad revenue. Sometimes you're doing well. Sometimes you can have something go completely viral and they send you a check for $5. It's very frustrating, and a lot of creators don't really have a lot of say in how that works. You're kind of stuck to the way that the system works. But that's the number one way. Usually that number is around the average is still around about $1 per 1,000, but they play a lot of tricks to try to pay you as little as possible. Sponsorships and brand deals, that's something I never really got into, but that's where I see most of the friends that I have that work full-time in this realm. That's where they get their money from, is they'll have a sponsor, they'll have somebody that they just, they'll mention from time to time. They'll record their videos outside their business. There's a lot you can do with the brand deals. I never really liked the sales side very much, so I just kind of, a lot of times I'll just do things. Somebody will say, hey, could you come see my restaurant? And I'll just be like, yeah, sure, let me come, I'll just come record a video, and they'll ask, can I pay you for it? And I'll say, just give me a free appetizer, just don't charge me for the Dr. Pepper. I am fine, promise. I just want to make people know that you're here. But people who are much smarter than I am in the ways of sponsorships and such make a lot of their money there. Consulting and speaking, when you build your brand online, you'll find that folks will start reaching out for sometimes keynotes, that type of thing. You can build a brand on that. Products and services, that kind of falls into the sponsorship thing. But the real takeaway is that very few creators are making money from just one thing. They have that ad revenue that's kind of just the bottom tier, and then they are hustling every day to build on top of that. And some of them are doing very, very well. But it is definitely a thing that you are plugged into it at all times. You treat it like a job in order to make it pay like a job. The last thing here is just knowing your brand and staying consistent. So for me, Mississippi history and Mississippi advocacy was where it all began. I wanted my kids to be proud of being from Mississippi. I wanted to be able to give people ammunition so that when folks went after Mississippi on social media, they could turn around and be like, well, actually, did you know that if we disappeared today, the Navy would lose almost its entire ability to create new warships? Or did you know that if we went away today, one of the most powerful nuclear reactors in the world would go offline, the one that we have down in Port Gibson? We're at the forefront of testing engines for NASA over at the Stennis Space Center. We're one of the only places in the world, the only place in the US that's testing autonomous flight right now. That's AI pilots. That's not drones. They send a plane up in the air and it's AI flying it up there, no human involved. They've made those planes solar. They're called sky dwellers. They're enormous, but they can stay in the air for months because they don't have a human pilot, and they just go up above the clouds and they recharge the batteries. On the coast, they're doing the same thing with submarines. We have these surfboard-looking things that they're called ocean dwellers, I believe, that they have a sail that'll pop up. It'll take them out into the ocean. It's AI driving the whole thing. Then it goes underwater, and it'll checks on underwater cables. It maps the ocean. That's all coming out of the coast of Mississippi. And so to be able to find these stories and advocate for the state and say, look how well we're doing. Look how much pride we should have in this. Look how much you guys depend on us and you don't even know it. That was the brand there. Now there's one thing I like to tell people too is if everything you do is positive, then it's not real. It's not authentic. It's an advertisement. It's a commercial. Or go even further down the path on that, it's propaganda. To be real, you have to look at the good and the bad. You can still keep a hopeful note to everything, but there's things you have to acknowledge. I love Mississippi. I don't want to live anywhere else in my lifetime. But that doesn't mean that I want to say, well, Mississippi's history I'm not going to think about. There's parts of it I'm not going to think about because it was very negative. There's things about our future, where we're headed, where at least just from my perspective and from my bias, I'll see things and say, I don't like the way that's going. I feel like we're repeating mistakes we've made in the past. And that's something that I'll make as part of my video, as just being real. Addressing the positive and the negative is a way of building that authenticity. It lets folks know that you're not here just to sell them something. You can be proud of something and you can still want it to improve. And so that's where that brand comes in. You'll see that every once in a while I'll do something just kind of random for laughs. Very, very few and far between. And it's usually just to get a laugh out of my kids. But you probably won't see me all of a sudden doing a cooking video, doing a dance tutorial. As hilarious as that would be, You're not going to see me doing movie reviews because there's a brand that I found and I'm sticking to that brand. If I want to talk about something else like that, I'm going to create a whole nother channel to do that because I don't want to confuse the message. Consistency is where that trust is built. When the audience is expecting something and you meet that expectation, that's building the trust. And then lastly, I'll just skip through this part real fast though, is just if you're on social media, be social. Respond to messages when you can, respond to comments when you can. Not only does that build up trust with your audience, it builds up engagement for the system, and the system reads that as, oh, this is a very popular content, look at all the conversation that's happening around it, let's keep pushing these videos higher. So that applies to whether you're a creator, whether you're running a social media page for a newsroom. If you are responding to people on your page, that does nothing but help you. Now, the important thing is stick close to your tone. Make sure that you're not jumping from voice to voice. You're not snarky here and trying to be professional here. You have to have a unified voice, especially if you're representing a company. You have to stay within the editorial guidelines. But even just responding and saying, thanks for the comment, something as short as that, that keeps your conversation at the top of the list for the platform. And lastly, the things that I wish I'd known before starting out is you're never going to feel ready. Just go ahead and start. You will learn as you go. The first few videos you do, you're going to look back on in a year and you're going to be very embarrassed about those videos. I know I absolutely am when I look back at some of my early stuff. Do it anyway. Credibility, as I mentioned, is built over time and through consistency. This is an important one, especially today. Don't feed the trolls. And that's very hard for me sometimes. I tend to be one of kind of my triggers is if I feel like someone is being bullied. I have always had a problem with bullies from ever since I was a kid. And if I see something where I feel like someone's being bullied or there's a bully in the comments, there's an innate drive that I have to go and tell them what they're doing wrong and set it right. But after a while, you learn that you have such a limited amount of bandwidth per day. There's only so many things you can focus on. Why let that person posting from a fake account, trashing your content, trashing you, trashing your home? Don't let them steal a minute more of your day than it takes to click the block button. Right now, there are some people, I think, that are legitimate, that will ask questions, that will come back at you and argue from a point of wanting to learn more. Those are great to engage. Some of my favorite comments that I get are the people that will comment and say, I disagree with 99% of the things you say on here, but I respect the way you say it. But I appreciated this point. And to me, hearing that from somebody that disagrees with you is one of the most, I can't put it into words, it's one of the most heartwarming feelings of knowing like we found some common ground. But if it's just trolls being trolls, don't waste time on them, get rid of them. A good teleprompter app, I can't say enough about that. Most of them are free. Get a good one, but it lets you craft your writing ahead of time, be a lot smoother, not miss any good points. And then lastly, you don't need permission, but you do need purpose. If you have an idea, start with the idea. Get out there, it's free, put that content out there, hone that content. You're gonna get better as you go along, but this is definitely a place where experience is gonna be your best teacher, because right now, there's no way for you to know what that platform is gonna look like a year from now. The best chance you have is learning what works now and then applying it to that evolution as it comes along. That's my brother. So this is my email address. If anybody ever has any questions or wants to reach out or just want you may take a look at a channel or something and that you're putting together and just give some feedback, always happy to do that. Email is always the best way to reach me because the direct messages and the comments and such on social media have, well, it's reached a level that I definitely do not see all of them. So it's that's definitely the way to reach it. If you ever want to know more about just what I've done just as on the business front, that's a totally different conversation on the fractional marketing side, but that's the website. And then Papa Mississippi is where you find me on TikTok. If TikTok goes away, also on Instagram with the same name, and just under my name, Brett Kenyon, on Facebook. So that is the presentation, but I wanted to open up for now just any questions and anything, yeah.
Firstly, I'm a big fan of your work.
Oh, thanks.
I think it was like a bit over a year ago, you posted a video about the strangest town names in Mississippi. And my question is really, are you aware that there's a town named Buzzard Roost? Because I commented this, but I don't think you...
And I do, because I included it in the next video, and I was looking for that. I'm so glad you said that, because I was looking for the comment so that I could go back and say, thank you, I put it in, because I hadn't heard of that yet either, but because of that, I found it. And yes, Buzzard Roost, crazy name of a city. It had if I'm remembering correctly, it was a place that has one of the artesian wells is there. That's where they drill down underground to where the water pressure is strong enough that it pushes the water up a pipe without having to have any sort of like pump or electrical thing. We have those all over Mississippi because we have so many aquifers. In fact, we even have one that's out in the Mississippi Sound where we used to have an island out there, the island of, some say Caprice, some say Capri. Whatever way I'm saying it is probably the wrong way. But they had casinos and things out there on that island, and the island sank. But they had this well out there, and the pipe from the well was still sticking up over the surface of the water, and fishermen would come by and get water from it, and then somebody hit it with a boat. So now you can, the well is out there. There's a tiny little spot where there's fresh water coming up out of the briny salt water, but good luck finding it now that the pipe is gone. But Buzzard Roost has one of those wells in it. It was one of those cities that started as there was like a church revival camp, I think, that was there. And then they had, but one of the reasons that the name got there was, well, as you would expect, lots of buzzards in the trees, and folks tended to just name things after what they saw. There was also a theory that because hunting was so popular out there and the hunters would all sit up in the trees, that that had something to do with it as well. But yeah, no, thank you for that comment. That was, yeah.
I was going to ask you, so for me, because I'm not from Mississippi either, I'm from Alabama, so
Mm-hmm.
how do you go about finding all of this niche history? Like, I hate to say niche, but I mean, things like that and like volcanoes under Jackson, that's news to me. So how do you go about finding things?
So one thing that I learned about Mississippi, and it was just this treasure trove of information, was Mississippi is great at oral history, at passing things down family member to family member and just word of mouth. But there was not really like a central repository of all these stories. They're all scattered out there in individual small books and websites and archives, and it's just, there's so many small things that are just, like, for example, if you go on just Wikipedia, pick any town in Mississippi, go into Wikipedia, and you'll see they'll list like, they'll have the history of the town there, any notable controversies or historic moments, and then they'll have a whole list under there with links of like notable people that came from that town. And I would go, sometimes just if I didn't have an idea, I'd go to Wikipedia, I'd look on there, I'd look at the notable people, I'd click on one, and all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I had no idea that the guy that was considered the fastest baseball player of all time was from this part of Mississippi. So that was part of it, is just a kind of a rabbit trail approach. But honestly, I think where I've learned the most was feedback. I would do, because the volcano story was one that I learned from one of the weathermen, Ken South up at WJTV, who is a huge Mississippi history buff. He was constantly traveling the state, showing me he was the one that introduced me to Delo Water Park and just all these neat little factoids from around the state. I think he's the one that told me about They found an intact prehistoric whale in the spillway when they were building the reservoir in Jackson. It's this huge mosasaur, I believe it was. It's whatever the thing was at the end of, I think it was the one that was at the end of Jurassic Park that comes up, or Jurassic World, the thing in the water that comes up, looks like a giant alligator thing. Those used to be swimming around above our heads when this was ocean. But they found that in there, and so he would tell me those stories, and so I would share that story as like, well, this really fascinating thing, and then people will write in and they'll say, hey, I loved that story. Have you ever done one about this? And for example, I just did a story a couple of nights ago about John Robinson. He was known as the Brown Condor, and he was a pilot. And I had no idea about that. Before last week at this time, I did not know that this person existed. I got a message saying, have you ever done something about the Brown Condor? I assumed it was a bird. I was wrong. I looked it up and I found this guy that he was back during, in the early 1900s, he was not allowed to attend flight school because of his race. So what he did was he got a job in Chicago as a janitor at a flight school, and he would just sit in the halls during his break times, and he learned everything he could. And he learned enough that he was able to earn his pilot's license. And somehow word of him got to the Emperor of Ethiopia, who at the time was struggling because Italy was, this was right before we got into World War II, but they were starting to expand their borders and they were attacking Ethiopia. And planes were just starting to come out, and the emperor there said, we got to have some folk, we got to get some wings in the air, but nobody here knows how to fly. Somehow found this guy from Mississippi who worked as a janitor to go to flight school, John Robinson, called him across. He went, he helped Ethiopia build their very first Air Force. He flew combat missions, he flew supply missions, he would fly the emperor around through battle. After the war was over, he went back and helped them start Ethiopia, the foundation of what is Ethiopia Airlines now, which is one of the biggest airlines in Africa now, I believe. And he died in a plane crash completely unrelated to any of these dangerous things he was doing. He was delivering blood for transfusions and some sort of engine trouble or something, and he crashed. But they gave him the nickname the Brown Condor over in Ethiopia because of how his bravery in the face of danger, how he just always stayed calm, and then his just speed and skill in the air. So that is a really long rabbit trail way of answering that question. But people will give you the next breadcrumb a lot of times. And so that's been the biggest thing for me.
Well, I'm sure you don't have this issue, but for those of us who are new to creating content, sometimes I find it like I struggle to get content ideas.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to help with that?
That's a very good question. Sometimes what I'll do is I try to keep a list for those days because I find that the ideas come in groups a lot of times. So I'll write down 3 or 4, and I won't do them in order a lot of times. I'll just kind of keep that list there off to the side in case I have a day of writer's block. But then there are days where it's just like, I need to get something out there so I can keep that consistency. What am I going to do? And so there's a few things that I've done to kind of help when I have that writer's block, at least when it comes to history. One is I'll look at the news. What's a current story that's happening right now that has some kind of a tie to history? Like if they're voting on some bill regarding voting rights, when in Mississippi's history did that particular issue first arise, and who was behind it? I'll start asking questions. I think why do we do that? Why, where does this come from? And sometimes answering that question for myself, it doesn't lead directly to the story, but somewhere in that process, I'll stumble across something that's just like, oh wow, okay, man, that's really fascinating. I'm gonna look into this a little bit more. So it's just honestly curiosity. I think is the big thing. It's just ask the why, ask the how, ask the who, and you'll be surprised at what kind of falls out of the couch cushions.
So like, I don't know if you really struggle with this, but like, I feel like if I started making content in a similar way, the people around me, like, I feel like I'd start getting looks and like, you know, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How did you combat with that? And like, did you ever outgrow that?
I'll answer the last part first. No, I'm still incredibly self-conscious a lot of times when, I mean, I love it, but like, don't get me wrong, but it's, I'll kind of turn red and giggle when, you know, people come up, they'll recognize me at the grocery store or something, and they're like, "Hey, you're the TikTok guy." And you kind of, after a little while, you learn kind of the, like the quick conversation sometimes, and you know, they just, they'll want to say something, or sometimes they'll give you an idea or something. But I'll tell you, I am very much an introvert, if you can believe it. I did theater in high school and in college specifically to help get over my introvertness. I did debate as well, and original oratory and that type of thing, because I hated that I couldn't stand up in front of a crowd without my hands shaking, and by crowd I mean like anything more than 3 people. If I ever had to hold a piece of paper, it was just like the whole time. So this has helped a lot with that, of just kind of being more comfortable being in front of people and being recognized. But the feeling never really goes away. I think, especially because so much of my life was behind the camera, and being in front of the camera was never, I didn't think anybody would watch if it was me doing it. So I think I still live in a little bit of a sense of disbelief that people do. But honestly, though, I hope that never goes away. I think I love feeling that excitement of like somebody coming up and being like, "I saw your video," and I'm like, "Really?" So hopefully that answers your question. But there's as far as like funny looks or anything, the closest I've ever gotten to that are the people that are also introverts that are like, "Oh, I'm not going to say anything. You know, I don't want to bother them." But then what they do instead is just like, as you're walking through the grocery store, you just like always see them like kind of looking at you. And you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's somebody that recognizes me and wants to say hi, but they're shy. But sometimes it feels like they're, you know, you're on a watch list. And they're just clandestine agents following you. You had one.
Okay, so how do you make yourself and your content stand out? Because I'm pretty sure there's like a lot of other content creators who also cover Mississippi facts and history.
Yeah.
So is it like the way you edit your videos, the way you kind of present yourself and the topic? Like, what do you do to make sure that your content isn't repetitive like maybe, or doesn't be repetitive like others?
That's a great question. So for me, there are other people that are doing Mississippi history, and there's some that had been doing it before me, and there's several that have started after me. And so to really stand out, you want to build your brand in a way that you can be excited for everyone else that's also in that space, and not ever feel like, oh, they're taking something from me, because you are so unique in the way that you're doing it. You know that, you know, they're just looking at it from a different angle. So for me, I was able to lean into the fact that I'm not from Mississippi, and that became really the big brand for me. It's, here's the guy that came in from the outside, and where a lot of people have, you know, will leave Mississippi, you don't hear as much about the people that come specifically to Mississippi. So telling that story became kind of my brand. And I think, you know, there was some humor in that I think people appreciated. Just, here's the things that I was not ready for moving to Mississippi. Here's what I learned marrying a person from Mississippi that I was not prepared for. Lots to talk about as far as the weather. I think people, one thing that is a very common occurrence on the page is me mispronouncing things that are Mississippi counties or town names. In my defense, though, they don't follow rules all the time. So, like there's definitely an in the kill, but it's you're not supposed to say. You call it the kill, but you would never know that unless you weren't from there. If you just reading it on a map, you're like, oh, that's kiln. But they'll very quickly point that out. So I think for me, leaning into the fact that I was not from here made it stand out. Since I don't have the Mississippi accent, I think that kind of made it stand out. But I think from an editing standpoint, it comes back to the timing a lot. Like you cut out the breaks, you give them the most important thing right off the top, and then you just talk to the camera as if you're talking to one person instead of a whole crowd. And that kind of helps build that personal connection, and then they'll stick around a little bit more. The editing, though, it doesn't hurt to have some video editing experience. If for no other reason than know things like if you put a picture up because you want to show a historical picture or something, if you give that picture a little bit of movement, a little soft zoom or a little pull out, it's much more engaging than just sitting there as static. Including captions and certain things because people are watching in different ways. Music sometimes, not always. If the mood fits. But you just find those little things in the editing side that it tells people you know what you're doing, but you're not going overboard with it, if that makes sense. But to answer the shortest answer to that, too late now that I've given the super long one, is find the way that your perspective is unique. Like, what are you bringing to the table that they're not finding from anybody else? And remind them constantly what that perspective is. Don't expect them to guess it.
I have a couple of questions, so I'm gonna ask at the same time.
Go for it.
So when you're filming and editing your content, how long before you post it do you film, and how long does it take you to edit it?
Ooh,
Yeah.
good question.
How do you make time to film your own content while managing your own business?
That's also a really good question. So I'd say time-wise, the way that it usually works is I'll come across something that I'm, a topic that I'm really interested in. And like that process can be anywhere from a day to multiple days of just as I have time, just kind of pull up an article or read through something, or now we have with ChatGPT and Claude and that type of thing. It does a great way of consolidating things. Like I'll say, hey, find me 5 articles about this topic, and then you save yourself a ton of time of having to Google those things, and it'll summarize it for you. So using the tools you have on hand to kind of shorten that is helpful. But I'd say the filming of it usually is one of the fastest things, because the way I work is I'll unless it's something that is just breaking news or totally off the cuff, that I'm just talking. Honestly, that usually takes the longest to shoot, because then I have to go back in and cut all the stuff that didn't really fit well. But I'll write out what I want. I'll try to keep it within a 90-second frame of time. And then I'll either do it one piece at a time, film it just as much as I can remember, 3 sentences at a time, however, or I'll put it on my teleprompter app and go through the whole thing so that I don't miss anything. But typically it's 5-10 minutes to do the actual shooting. That's usually the easy part. Editing is where it takes a little bit longer. So what I will tend to do is I'll shoot things during the day, like I'll go out during my lunch break or something. And I used to go for a walk in the woods during every lunch break, and I would just bring my phone and I would just record my thing while I'm walking. And then I'd come back and, that night around 5:30, 6 o'clock is when I would actually do the editing side of it. Mainly because when I finish the editing, I like to be able to just go ahead and push go. The hardest thing is when I have a video that I'm really proud of and I finish it at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I go, all right, well, nobody's going to see this until 5 or 6, so I have to sit on this and wait. And I hate doing that, partly because I'm afraid I'll forget, and partly because I'm just proud of it and want to get it out there. So it's rarely is it something that it's all in one go. I kind of break it up. And it's like, all right, I have 10 minutes free to go film something now. I'm just gonna go step outside and do that. When you're shooting on your phone, especially with, I tell you, the newer phones you're getting now, the faster they're replacing the high quality cameras. Like you can do so much with just this that you couldn't do before. But I'm literally out there just, holding it like this with my hand and just talking to it. Got to get the upward angle so you don't have this in there. But just sit there, talk for a little bit. I'll find a place that I know has good lighting. It doesn't have a distracting background, and a lot of times it's like I'll finish dinner with the kids. They'll start their homework, and I'll be like, all right, I'm going to go step outside where the motion detector light is and shoot this real quick. But yeah, that's about it. Sometimes they take a little longer to put together, but usually it's like 20 minutes, 30 minutes to write, 10 minutes to shoot, 15, 20 minutes to edit.
So you're putting it out the same day that you finish editing?
Most of the time, yes. Now there is, once you start, the great thing about history is, it's still true the next year. So sometimes there'll be days where I have, I'm like, I've been traveling all day, I didn't have time to shoot something, but a year and a half ago I did this story that only 500 people saw. I'm just going to repost that since nobody saw it. So that's why sometimes if you're watching my channel, you'll be like, wow, you grew that beard real fast overnight. Or why are you outside right now in a t-shirt? It's 30 degrees. It's because I filmed that in June. But yeah, usually I'm recording and posting the same day.
Well, let me do last question because we're getting a little long.
Sorry.
So you said that you need to capture attention within the first 3 seconds, and every 10 seconds give them something to stay around. How would you adjust that for long form content?
That's a great question. So long form, without going too much into it, there is a market for it. Like some things with like reels, it won't push your video if it's more than 3 minutes, but TikTok will let you it'll push it, doesn't matter how long it is, as long as people are watching it. 7, 10 minutes, however long you want to do. YouTube also, has the more long form thing. There's a couple creators that do a really good job of this. I'm not going to know their names, but you'll know probably their content. There's the guy that usually does like the crime story. He reminds me a little bit of like a young Johnny Knoxville, but he always has like the AI generated pictures, and he's like, this is Jenny so-and-so. She's about to have a problem. And he tells this whole story of this crime story. And he does a really good job because every 10 to 15 seconds, he'll drop in a question or he'll drop in a cliffhanger. But what he didn't know was this, or but now he had to figure out how is he going to get this out of the house, something like that. Just every so often, just to kind of keep that sense of curiosity in there. I find that with the long form, as long as people can tell a natural flow to it, they'll stick around. If it feels like it's just all over the place, they won't stay. If it feels like my dad, after he was an English teacher, became a pastor, and one of the things that a lot of pastors will do, you'll notice, is you'll think the sermon's wrapping up, and then they'll be like, and now my second point, and that's when everybody starts groaning and looking at the clock. So you don't want to do that either. You want to make sure that it has like that solid flow, and then don't be afraid to lose the babies, I guess is the way to put it, is if you have a line or something in there that you love, but it's not contributing to keeping a smooth flow, it's just sometimes you just have to cut it.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. I wish we had more time.
Yes, I'm sorry. That went a lot later than I thought it would.
And if it's okay if you have a couple of moments,
Yeah,
to stick
absolutely.
around, just in case anyone has any questions that they didn't get a chance to ask, so they can ask. And real quick, I'd like to bring Bria Turner up if she's in here. She is our public affairs and events coordinator, and she is going to let everyone know what the next Media Mentors is, as well as a couple of other events that we have coming up. And then we'll get things wrapped up. So, Bria?
Well, y'all, did y'all enjoy today's session? Yes, awesome. We have our meeting mentor sessions every month, and this month we actually have 2. So if you enjoyed this session and you want to be in an environment like this again, February the 27th. So that's at the end of the month. You have a few weeks to kind of prepare and make sure that you're available for that. And if you do want to go ahead and register, make sure it's on your calendar. There are, anywhere you see the flyers, which are on both doors, you can scan the QR code and go ahead and register. Also, exciting news, the Roy Howard Community Journalism Center, we have been officially here for a year. Reporting what matters, going over media literacy, really promoting that in our community, all the things that we do, and so we want you all to come and celebrate with us. So in 2 weeks, and you can find more information on our website, but in 2 weeks, we're gonna be having events that we wanted to invite you to. Our first event is the Truth on Trial, and this is a media literacy event where there will be a public panel focused on misinformation, trust, and community impact. So you can hear those discussions about how you can become more media literate, why is that important, what's going on within that space, and our media literacy coordinator will be there with that. We also have RHCJC Live, which is more student focused. So this will be an event where we will be showcasing what we do through tabling events, interactive booths, but there will also be professionals there who are giving speeches, and you'll be able to have a Q&A with them. And our last event that is, of course, open to the public and is at night is the Night of Stories with Rick Cleveland, which is another event celebrating storytelling and journalism all together. So more information is indeed on our website. We just want to make you aware it's happening in 2 weeks, and so this is the Truth on Trial is on a Wednesday night. The Night of Stories is on a Friday night. So come back out and join us. That's it, y'all.
Thank you, everybody, again for joining us. Brent is going to stick around a little bit for anyone who has any questions or wants to share any kind of contact information. And we will see you in the next 2 weeks at our next Media Mentor. So thank you so much.
Everybody say hi.
Hi.
Pizza, yeah. Oh.